Good afternoon, Warriors! Back with another episode of the 1% Club. And it's snowing out here, and I decided to come out and warm up the car a little bit. And so I'm going to do a video. And so hope you guys are doing well. We're going to do another one of our episodes of our Vigor Warriors 2 and the 1% Club. Thank you guys for all your donations and comments and likes, subscriptions. It's I feel like it's a very blessing from the Lord that we're doing the right thing and doing God's will here, and this is good, and I hope you guys are getting something out of these things that we're talking about. A few last shout outs here from my list from last week. Hugh Mongus, thank you. The guy, Sam XBT, I appreciate that. Giovanni, of course, Dallas Teague, thank you for your comment. We will do one on Michael Jackson, I promise you, my friend. And Nana the Soul, and JD, and Eduardo's great story from Poland. I appreciated all those type of things that we talked about during the week a little bit here, and focusing as we get closer to Christmas time. So we got one today that I'm going to use two parts of this. One is going to be the price you pay under semen retention. That's going to be from my mojo. So shout out to my mojo on this. And then Alan Tanner also talked about using it or losing it, and he was asking whether or not you would lose any power, any sort of ability to get excited in those things when intercourse presents itself. So let's kind of talk about both of those a little bit here, and kind of focus on this a little bit. So in our society, and I kind of watched a couple of good videos recently that I think it's called Manfulness, and a couple other ones they were talking about, and I didn't really kind of look at them that closely, but I saw a few things, and I look at titles, and you look at different things, and you kind of realize that how men and women look at things, are different than obviously when I was, a young person. But still, you still got the same sort of thing that is the problem. It's always been a problem. It was the problem when I was younger too. And this is a difference between the visual type of perspective, which males have. And I go back to the Hugh Hefner comment about the fact that men are very visually oriented, and they get pleasure out of seeing things that are beautiful. This has been since time that started, beginning of time. A caveman looks at a cave woman and is attracted. That goes way back, because that's the whole basis of procreation. The male has to find someone that they look pleasing for them to have this intercourse, and females know this, and so the illusion is there that's created that this is something that's very attractive, so the male will partake and obviously have children and keep the generations going and going and going and going. This has been going on like this for thousands of years. The issue occurs is that because it's a visually oriented thing, men sometimes get into this nature, and we talked about this in the last video, of worshiping females. This goes back to people like Cleopatra, right? People have fought wars over women. They've started wars over women. This happens because of the physical beauty that women have. Once women hit a certain age, however, they're not as beautiful. And so they become they look at life a little bit differently than men do when they are looking for a partner and looking for somebody to mate with. The ironic part of things is females, when they're younger, they are very beautiful to most people, and so they have lots of options. Males don't have a lot of options because males are not viewed the same way. Males are viewed about how much income they can produce, the potential they have as a father, as someone raising children, things like that. All those type of things males have, not so much a physical nature. There are some exceptions, of course, but for the most part, that's not what males are looked at. So the trouble we have in society right now, as far as that I'm seeing, and maybe I'm incorrect about this, but I'm just kind of throwing it out here, is the fact that males will look at things and saying, okay, this is what I'm preferring. But when they say that, now they become discriminatory to women. They're saying, well, you can't stop women from being this way, sleeping around, doing all kinds of stuff. You can't do that. And this has happened because of all these movements we've had since the 1970s. But it's gone way out of control. And what's happened then is that men, are looked upon, if they have any standards, Well, those are not any good. They can't have standards, right? Well, females can have standards all they want, and their preferences, right? They want somebody who has so much money, that makes so much successful, things like that. But it's a false illusion as well on that side of the ball game, because what ends up happening is that because men look at things visually, most men don't care about the career of women. They don't care about, those type of things. They could care if it's going to be a good mom and family values. They could care about that, yes. But that's not something that originally men look at. And let me just be honest about it. Most men will look at the physical qualities of a woman to see if they're attractive. And women know that. This is why the makeup industry and all kinds of industries are, tremendous, sky high. They're making profit. They will always make a profit because women know that they are basically, as Hugh Hefner says, exhibitionists, and they will show off because they know that attracts the men who are very visually oriented. Women are not that visually oriented. They're visually oriented, but they look at different things and they see different things. And it goes back to the old survival type of thing back in the old caveman days. Females had to survive. They weren't as physically strong, but they wanted to raise their children and continue to propagate the generations, and so they had to use a lot of craftiness and manipulation to be able to survive. Anybody would do that. That's understandable. But males also then use strength and brute strength to be able to get things done. So the idea that you have to look at here is kind of realizing that when you are looking at life nowadays, women and men do look at things differently. And so as you do this, if you're not on some sort of self-control, self-discipline, then basically you're going to fall into that beta category in which you're going to worship women. And women will just kind of play along, and maybe if they're in their 30s or 40s, they may actually want to get married because they can settle down, there's a person who's going to listen to them, but then they try to control that beast. Now, they don't know that consciously. This is all subconsciously type of thing. And so what ends up happening is they try to control that beast to the point where now you become a yes person and you've lost your whole identity and you have no masculinity whatsoever left. And we see this over and over and over again. And so the thing you have to kind of look at is whether or not the price you pay for SR, semen retention, is something you're aware of. And this is what I think we have to kind of start with. So what is the price you pay? Well, you're not in this society. And the Lord says you're not of this world. You're basically in a different world. And this is why we talk about 1%, less than 1%. You're not in this world. You're basically kind of saying that I'm not in this percentage. I'm looking at a different type of world that I'm in because I'm looking at doing something that a lot of men are not doing. I'm controlling my retention. So now I have a bigger, stronger way to kind of focus on my own goals, my own things, and I'm not worshiping women. I'm not chasing women around because they visually look good, right? So this is something that is a key type of thing to think about as you kind of go through this. What is the price you're paying? Well, you're paying the price of basically not fitting into society. Now, this is something that you have to kind of think about. And I think in Keldler's book, Keldler, K-E-L-D-E-R, sorry about that, guys. Keldler's book, he talks about that. You have to be ready to be able to take this celibacy, brahmacharya seriously and transmute that energy. Because if you're not, and you don't want to be, ridiculed or kind of jumped on because you have this viewpoint, well, then you might want to wait until you're more ready to do this. But I think for most of us, we realize that the importance of this outweighs all of that stuff. The fact that you are standing up for yourself, that you're being a man, you're being someone as a warrior is strong enough, and you don't give a damn what people think. You just don't. You're moving your own direction. And as a result of that, you get a lot of benefits that we've talked about many times before. But the price you pay, the biggest price you pay, is you're not of this world. You're now living in more of a spiritual world. You're not getting gratification necessarily by having sex. Now, there's no reason why you can't still have a girlfriend and a wife and things like that and enjoy those type of pleasures that the Lord wanted us to have as well. But it's not dominating your life. And so when Alan also asked the question about using it or losing it, well, we all have that high level of sexual energy. And If you have that, you'll notice it right away. For instance, if you see something right walking across you, or you see a picture and all of a sudden it just, you couldn't stop from seeing it and you get excited, you know you have that energy. You can use it anytime you want to. Now, you have to kind of choose, well, what is the situation I'm going to use it with? If you have a naked person in front of you, well, that's a whole different type of thing. You have to kind of decide very quickly, because you'll know you're going to get excited. And so the question becomes is, what do you do? If it's the right type of situation and you're with your wife or something like that, and you want to procreate, you want to have children with the person, that might be something where you would actually release. So you have to make that kind of choice. But again, if it's not the right situation, there's things we've talked about, breathing methods, things we've talked about that you can actually go ahead and transmute that, like Kelder says in his book, right? He talks about the fact that you have that sixth exercise, in which is celibacy, and you're bringing it up towards you, the energy from back up to your brain and the rest of your body, from where it came down to with the reproductive type of system. So the thing is that when you're looking at this, you will always be able to use it when you need it. And there's no doubt in my mind that's the case, right? I've had hundreds of examples over the last 900 and whatever days it's been, 30 some days, that I've gotten, those type of things hit me, right? But the idea is that you have to go ahead and kind of move past it. Now, we're not counting, of course, but, obviously one time I lost that with the monk mode, and now I'm back on another streak. Because I'm trying to really be very hard on myself and say, look, I'm not going to try to entertain those thoughts. But do they come all the time? Of course. I'm really measuring it in my way, whether I entertain those, whether or not I let them kind of, work in my, nest in my head. And if I don't, well, then I move on to another day, right? And of course, obviously, with the releasing, that's a whole different type of thing, when you're doing that. So the thing is, guys, when you're looking at this whole idea, is that, and Alan, you will be able to use it if you need to. The question becomes is, are you transmuting it? Are you able to transmute it? Because we talked about this in a previous episode. If you're not transmuting it, you could very easily become frustrated. And you could do some of those things that we're talking about, where people get, depressed, frustrated, things like that, because you're not using the energy. The energy is sitting there. And so it kind of becomes disruptive to you, because you're not using it in a productive way. So that's why we talk about the fact that you gotta keep thinking to yourself, you're not really losing it, right? You're not really using it. Now, we can talk about the fact that if you're not using your muscle, right, and obviously that area down there has muscles as well, then you can make that argument that, well, maybe you lose that type of ability because you're not really thinking about it that much. But if you are a person with any sort of sexual energy, now if you don't have that, then I think I would recommend obviously going to the doctor and seeing what that issue might be. And believe it or not, a lot of people in their 20s are having this issue because they they've released so many times that they really have a dysfunction that they have to kind of take care of, and they're in their 20s. So it is happening, and this is why we have to kind of stop this nonsense and this overabundance of releasing to the point where it's just hurting men like crazy. But the thing is, in our society, women and the society and the media and all this kind of stuff has put up this idea that we cannot have preferences, or we shouldn't be having preferences, we shouldn't be in leadership of the situation, and that we should go ahead and worship women. And I say, bah humbug. I'll be Scrooge for a second. Bah humbug on that kind of stuff. What you have to do is realize that you are the person who is in charge. You are the person who's the table, what do you want to call it? And you're the one that makes the choices. You're the one that makes the choices, because you're the one visually oriented. You have that drive. You have that. Most women, even whether they're ambitious or not, the bottom line with women is that they're very much nurturers, and that's how God created them. And if they ignore that, they may ignore that for part of their lifetime, but in the long run, this is what they need. And a lot of women, fortunately, I've interviewed, they come back in their 30s and 40s and regret a lot of things now, because of the fact that they followed this misleading path. They didn't realize that God, A, didn't believe in God, and two, they didn't believe the purpose that they had was just as important as the male's purpose. It's just a different purpose. No good, no bad. It's no weakness for a woman to be a housewife. In fact, I think it's one of the hardest things to do. It's no weakness to raise kids. I think it's one of the hardest things to do, much more harder than jobs I've had. So the thing is, guys, when you look at this idea, realize that you're not going to lose it just because your energy level is so high. It just takes one stimulation, but you have to control that and realize if it does happen, A, it tells you that you're okay, but B, it also tells you you're going to have to go ahead and kind of learn how to transmute it. Now, once again, the price you're paying, back to my mojo here, the price you're paying is that you're not living in this world, my friends. And I say this again, and realize this. Same way as you've taken God, and in my case, Lord Jesus Christ, and become saved, you are now of a different world. You're living in a spiritual world with God. And a lot of this starts in a spiritual world. And we'll talk about that because I do have this on my topic list here. What was the one I was going to talk to? I think it's OG Airmaxes has one. Talked about the fact that it starts in the spiritual world. And that's what we talk about. This whole thing with retention is starting in the spiritual world. You start in the spiritual world, and then you kind of move and you transfer that into the physical. The physical does not mean anything. And this is why having intercourse, sex, doesn't mean anything at all. And especially unless you're having children, it doesn't mean anything. And so when you're talking about this, short-term pleasures here creates a lot of long-term issues, and this pleasure you're going to have in the long run. You know this because as soon as you release, a lot of you guys have told me, well, all of a sudden, I feel bad. Well, of course, I know. I experienced that for years. You do feel bad because you know what you did was not the right thing to do. That energy you need to be saved as much as possible. Now, are we perfect? No. Warriors, we're not perfect. And that's okay. But you're heading in the right direction. God knows that. God knows you're heading in the right direction. He will give you the strength to take those steps by step. It took me 47, I don't know what it is now anymore, 47, 48 years to make those steps. So I can talk very strongly on this, that it does take time. You have to overcome all those barriers in your mind to be able to say, I'm going to live in this other world. And you are living in this other world. And you have to continue living in this world because this world is more spiritual. This is why women can see the attraction in you. Because they see you as a masculine male, and there's very few people out there like this that are living in that kind of spiritual world. At one point, people who practice celibacy, monks and those people, if they were really practicing it and they practice semen retention, they were honored. I think we've had so many problems in the churches nowadays with a lot of other kind of deviant behavior that you don't see this anymore. They're not honored. Because what you have is you have a lot of people who basically, don't follow that basic rule that they used to have. And retention is one of the key things you do. And there's a reason why they put that down. Now, you could talk about all the things in the medieval times and all those kind of things and reasons back and forth, and you can argue back and forth. But the thing is that they wanted those people to not be able to be tempted. And if you have that self-control and you know how to have retention, you know how to do that, you're not going to be tempted. And though they may put a lot of things out there about people dying and those kind of stuff, the bottom line is that there's a lot more people that live than die with that kind of stuff. And those type of people had immense self-control. You look people in the Bible and look at all these people who had immense self-control, Jesus included. And you look at that and you say, okay, how was this person so effective? Well, they were actually sacrificing their life in the physical world for the spiritual world. And that's the whole key to it. So I think, shout outs to OG Airmaxes for this as well. And a shout out to Alan Tanner. And thank you very much for that. And also my mojo. You guys have hit on a right good point here. I think this starts in the spiritual world, right? And the thing is that you have to pay a price. This is not an easy thing, my friend. You got to pay a price. And the price you're paying is you're not going to live in this physical world anymore. I mean, you're obviously living in the physical world, but I mean by this is you're primarily thoughts and ideas is outside this world. You're looking at life differently. You're not motivated by simple pleasures. That's how you're getting control. And chances are, if you're really using a lot of these motivation and retention, things like that, you're basically not going to go ahead and do other types of addictive qualities either. There's a good chance if you practice retention, you're not going to drink. You're not going to do drugs. You're not going to eat a lot, overeat. You're not going to gamble. You're not going to smoke. You know, you're not going to have all those addictive behaviors you can do. And that's, in my case, what's happened as well. Now, I never drank or smoked as it was, but still, a lot of the other things like overeating, I used to do that. You know, gamble, I didn't really gamble that much, but I knew what I had to do. The problem was, my addiction was obviously the releasing, and that was we all have addictions of some sort that we have to fight. All right. So anyway, going back to this thing, a summary real fast here. The price you pay, my mojo, in my opinion, is that you're not living in this world anymore. You're living in the spiritual world. You're moving towards God as you do this more and more, and He's leading you down that path. Can you lose it? You know, if you don't use it, Alan, I think I understand the point that's brought up here, and it's a good point because obviously we've learned how to use muscles in practicing like football and different things, and we use those muscles. But the question then becomes is, you will get excited. It's almost impossible. If you don't have that kind of ability, well, then that's a different type of thing. But 90% of us have that ability, and we're able to go ahead and react to that, and then we're able to say, okay, then we can control that. It's really the more controlling it that's the key. And I think I had a quote Eduardo sent to me recently about this as well. You know, it's a two-edged sword. You know, the coin is a two-edged coin. You know, one side is a sin, one side is a pleasurable activity. But you have to control those, and you are in control. This is why we say men are in control, at least of themselves. You don't need to control other people if you control yourself, and that's the key. All right, guys, I'm going to do another one quickly in a few minutes here since I'm sitting here. God bless you guys, and remember, every day is a new day to a wise warrior. Battle on, my friends. Battle on.